Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. In this episode, you're going to meet an incredible woman. Her name is Bev Williams-Krause, and her life story is going to touch your heart and soul. Now, I know Bev as a bright and bubbly stylist who lives on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and she's got a wonderful Instagram account called The Iris May Style. Even though you feel like you know someone on social media because you see them often, this was a really great reminder that there is always so much more to a person than meets the eye. Most women in the middle of life have gone through many highs and lows, but Bev has gone through more than lots of women put together. This was her first podcast, so there was a lot to learn about Bev during the interview, and I had absolutely no idea about many of these chapters in her life. There was so much to unpack that I soon realized that we would need another interview. So this is part one of her story. In this episode, we cover Bev's early years and the diagnosis of cervical cancer in her early 20s. She shares how her cancer treatment left her with the incredible difficulty of carrying her babies anywhere close to full term. And we chat about her heartache of losing 5 babies, as well as a joy of giving birth to her one surviving child at a nail-biting 28 weeks. We talk about the impact this had on her mental health and her marriage, particularly in a time where you didn't talk openly. But today, Bev shares openly and vulnerably about her life experiences, knowing that her story will help other women. It really is an episode that's going to take you on a journey, and I'm sure you're going to be as mesmerised and as blown away by this fabulous woman as I was. Today's episode does delve into some sensitive topics, and I recognise that these discussions can be triggering for some. I just want to encourage you to prioritise your well-being. So if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, please consider reaching out to a trusted friend, a family member, or a mental health professional for support. Now, part 2 of Bev's story will be on next week. So make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss it. Now, let's begin. A very warm welcome to the Redefining Midlife, Bev.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Jo. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we've just had a little bit of an introduction, a chat before hitting the record, and this episode is going to be phenomenal. There's so many things that we're going to be touching on. So yeah, everyone make sure that you grab a cup of tea or make sure you've got your earbuds in, get comfy, or whatever you're doing, you are going to want to listen to this conversation we're about to have. Now, Bev, you've got a really familiar face on my Instagram feed, and I can't recall how you came to be on my feed, but straight away there was a connection there that I followed you because you seem to be such a beautiful, natural lady, open with various things that were happening in your life. But there's always a lot more to a person. And as I've discovered just in a brief chat with you this morning, before we hit record, there's a lot more that meets the eye. And I think we were also chatting about how we can be quite judgy about somebody and think they've got it all together and their life's always been perfect. But, you know, as we also said, that this time of life, you realise you go through a lot of adversity as well. So I'm happy to talk with you more about the highs and the lows and all the in-betweens on our conversation today. So
can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. Now, listeners will have picked up that your voice isn't an Australian voice. So can you tell us where you came from originally?
Yes. So I was born in Birmingham in the UK, hence the accent, very Brummy accent. I lived in and around that area for probably the first 18 to 20 years, then slowly migrated out of Birmingham and went a little bit north to Staffordshire and then kind of stayed in and around the Staffordshire area until emigrating here at 48. So it's, you know, the UK was a huge part of my life, but hence the broad kind of Brummie/English accent.
Okay. And what was life like as a child in Birmingham when you were quite young?
Very, very different to how people grow up now. I would liken it to when we first came to Australia, which was a long time before we emigrated. We actually took a trip to Byron Bay. And I remember getting there and feeling like I'd gone back in time.
Yeah.
Walking down one of the main streets in Byron, I was thinking, this is so old-fashioned, and where is everything, and why are people like got this slow lifestyle? I feel like that was my lifestyle in the UK, but I just fast forward all those years and walked into Byron and I identified with, this is how the UK used to be. Now, this probably would be like 15 years ago, and Byron will have changed immensely in that 15 years. But when we first got here, I think it was the first place I identified to similar to how I grew up in the UK.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Like such a weird comparison, but it's the one thing I've always remembered of how Byron made me feel it was like when I was growing up.
And was that comforting?
Yeah, it was quite comforting because it's a big thing to live in another country, no matter what age we do it. I think as a child, talking about my childhood, Joe, as a child, I can remember sitting on my fiberglass slide in the back garden of 64 Hartley Road where we lived. Yeah. And I sat on the top of it before I slid down. And my parents were in the garden gardening, and I said, one day I would like to live in Australia. And they looked at me. It was like, it was so weird. I was probably about 8 or 9. And then I don't know what the time frame was from that moment of me saying that. But then I remember coming home from school one day, and there was these very, very long, narrow sets of paperwork. Yeah. And it was to apply to move to Australia. And it was the weirdest thing. And I was like, can we go? Can we go? Can we go? I really want to go. But we never ended up doing it. But that moment in my life at 8 has finally come true because I'm here, and I came at 48. Yeah. So yeah, quite a weird, I had a great upbringing. Mum, dad, brother, sister. Yeah, we didn't have a lot, but I always felt surrounded by love, and I was the youngest, so I think I was the most spoiled. So it was great. I had a great upbringing.
I'm the baby of the family too, and I must say that I think that might be the case as well. I know my sisters would definitely agree with that.
There's definitely a really big plus point to being, there was an 8-year gap between myself and my sister, and a 10-year gap between my brother. Oh. So like you there, Joe, like nodding, it's kind of that, we're so lucky. Yeah. That 8-year gap was amazing. I loved it. Yeah. I felt spoilt by everyone, including my brother and sister.
Oh, isn't that amazing? Yes. I can really relate to you with that one. So, but what was life like as a teenager? Was it an easy path for you, or was it a difficult one?
Super easy. I had very relaxed parents. Looking back, I can tell you before I say this, I am not that relaxed parent now. I have, saw how they were with me, and I've made a lot of changes as a parent. They were very lucky with me that I probably didn't bring any trouble to the door because I had a lot of freedom. My friends that I grew up with there were 4 girls together. 2 of them were 3 years older than myself and my other friend. Yeah. And that in itself is a little story, because the other friend I'm talking about of the same age, I've remained friends with them all my life and still friends today. But would you believe they emigrated to Australia 3 years before us? So they're actually in Australia.
Huh. And do you catch up with them?
All the time. There are friends that are family here. So we spend every Christmas together, everything together. That's what we do. Yeah, yeah. I kind of grew up with her. She lived across in the same street, but just in a little grove area. So really super weird. So we were given a lot of freedom. We went out. I started drinking alcohol far too early. In the UK, you could really get away with it. Very different to Australia. And, I partied extremely hard very early on. Again, I that's kind of a familiar
story, Bev. And back in the day, that was how it was in Australia too.
Oh, was it? I mean, now it's weird in Australia, because I remember when we brought Becky here before she was 18, it was difficult to take her anywhere because everybody was asking Becky for ID all the time. We didn't have that in the UK. So I found that really strange. And I also found, and I get it, I do get it, but as a mother, bringing Becky up, I also wanted Becky to have a relaxed attitude around alcohol, because I felt that was really good for me. I probably went too far as a teenager, and, maybe can even confess to going to school with a hangover, which is really bad. But I survived. But, with Becky, we would offer her a glass of wine very early on in life, because, we were close to Europe, and that's the European way, to not make it a taboo subject. So I kind of, probably offered Becky alcohol a bit too soon, but in a great way. And she always said, no, I don't want it, but it wasn't taboo. So we kind of learn a lot, don't we? We parent very differently to how we grew up.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yes. Maybe a good thing.
Yes, definitely.
It's that career path, because fashion is such a large part of your life and has been for the last couple of decades. Was that the case when you were a teenager and into your early 20s?
It's actually really super weird, because looking back now, I still giggle at this. But the first job I ever had was as a model in the fashion industry. And it was kind of around the 16 to 18 year mark. Mm-hmm. And I used to belong to a fashion agency in the centre of Birmingham, and would be sent on jobs. And, so fashion started then, but really fashion started before for me, because these amazing parents that I told you I had, that allowed me a lot of freedom, also allowed me a creativity in myself. And I can remember at junior school, because my mum was very fashionable, and everyone always looked up and said she looked amazing. And I think that kind of must have passed down to me, because at junior school, like when we went shopping on a Saturday, I would have the latest clothes just being released, and I would go to school in them, and everyone would say, what are you wearing? And I would be so like, you'll be wearing this eventually. Even as a young child, I was confident enough to say, eventually you'll wear this, but I'm just wearing it first. But I had the confidence to do that. And so I feel like that just then went through those early teenage years, and when I was drinking when I shouldn't be, and going out with, friends that were 3 years older than me. I did what they did. So I dressed up, I was into fashion, and I kind of pushed all those fashion boundaries. When I look back, I looked ridiculous. But at the time, I thought I looked amazing.
Well, in fairness, it probably was the 80s, so...
Honestly looked ridiculous. I look back now, and I just could curl over and die at how bad I went out. But, thankfully everybody around me in Birmingham city centre was wearing exactly the same clothes. So I didn't stand out like a sore thumb, but I do on photographs now.
So what was your career path for you when you finished school?
So I've always had an admin kind of clerical background, but the big urge to always be involved in fashion. So I did the modelling thing, then stepped back from it, because it's actually a really hard thing to do. You never know when you're working. No 2 days are the same. And, at 16, I wasn't driving. I had to go everywhere by bus. It was a pain in the bum. So then I got a real job, a normal job, and was in admin then for quite a long time. Accounts background, any kind of admin, that's what I was doing. And Johnny, I didn't meet Johnny until a long time after, but Johnny isn't Becky's dad. So I got married to Paul, which is Becky's dad, in the UK when it was 1989, so I was 26.
Yeah.
So I got married to Paul, and then I met him in that clerical kind of background in the office. And then I stopped working, and we were trying to have babies. A lot of stuff had gone on in that time. So when I say I was just working and going to work doing clerical, there was an awful lot of stuff going on in the background. Like I had cervical cancer very early on in my 20s, which caused a lot of damage to my uterus.
Wow.
So a lot of people do have, from just having a simple pap smear, you can find out these things. However, with me, the things you have done, like a comb biopsy to try and fix that, I had that done a couple of times and it didn't fix it. So those cells then transferred onto my uterus, which was very unusual. And I had to have quite a large operation to try and remove those cells and keep my uterus in place. Obviously, the final step would have been a full hysterectomy at that age, which we didn't want to do.
Yes.
So I went through a lot there and had a very damaged uterus. So when it came to being married and wanting to start a family and have a baby, I was starting it from a different level to what everybody else was starting.
Yes.
It wasn't so much the fact of not being able to get pregnant. It was the fact of being able to carry a baby was very different for me. So my uterus didn't expand. Like a growing uterus has to stretch and, you know, mold into all these different positions to accommodate a baby. My uterus doesn't, well, I haven't got one anymore, but it didn't do that. So the minute I got pregnant, unfortunately with twins the first time,
oh my goodness.
yeah, your body instantly knows there's no way. And this is how we find our bodies so incredible. There is no way your body can carry twins. Like, it cannot happen. Your uterus isn't going to be able to expand. So the first time, I think the first baby that I never lost the two together, had another twin pregnancy afterwards, but the first pregnancy, they always came away separately. So I was under consultant care from day dot. Injections, day dot, all of these things to try and make my body accept and be able to cope with pregnancy. But we found out a lot during those first two big pregnancies, so two sets of twins. The first one, I probably around the 12 weeks lose the first one, and the second one around 18 weeks.
Oh,
the second, yeah, I know, it's really tough. The second twin pregnancy, the first baby around the same time again. But then the second baby, I had to deliver. So we got into the 24-week mark. And then had a scan every single week, you know, full consultant care in the UK. I was very lucky. I was under an amazing team. But they found out that the baby had some really serious damage, some brain damage, and the baby wouldn't survive, even in uterus, to full term. I'm kind of like, you have to make a really humongous decision. That we knew there was severe deformity with the baby. And the only thing the hospital could offer me at that time was, we need to put you into labour and let's see what the outcome is. You know, they had nothing else to give me. So we did a full labour and the baby died during birth. That was, something I carried for a very long time with me, you know. You kind of don't get over it.
No, it would never leave you. It would never leave
No.
you. And that's a part of the tapestry of your story and your life. So Becky was the final pregnancy?
No, so Becky was number 5. So Becky was baby number 5.
Gotcha.
And she was my first single pregnancy. And it was absolutely incredible. So my pregnancies didn't kind of go the same as everybody else's. And this is something we touched on earlier, Jo, that I know a lot of people can get pregnant and then have what we'll call an okay pregnancy. Everybody has their peaks and troughs and ups and downs. For me, obviously getting pregnant, I just then go into the mode of what's going to happen, because I can't carry this baby. I'm pregnant. So getting pregnant wasn't the issue. It was just carrying her. And so from the injection started again to try and hold her in, she seemed to be comfortable. She seemed to be doing all of the right things. We then get to about the 16-week mark and I try to go into labour. So they stitch her in. We fully stitch up my cervix and we keep her in. And then we go a bit further and we have more dramas. I'm on complete bed rest. I'm not even able to get out of bed this whole time. And then we get to 28 weeks and I woke up and I thought, if we can get to 28 weeks, she can survive. So rather than 40 weeks, I was looking for the magic 28. I got to 28 weeks and 1 day, saw the consultant, and he said, you're fine. I'll see you next week. And I thought, I'm not fine. I feel like I'm in labour. And then I took about 48 hours to have Becky. not in very normal circumstances at all. I went to hospital. They couldn't deal with me. I was too complicated. So they ended up transferring me via ambulance, flashing lights. They gave me a drug to try and help Becky, but would bring on a heart attack for me.
Oh.
So I had a doctor and a nurse standing over me, flashing light ambulance, 40-mile trip to a centre of excellence. And when I got there, there's a whole team standing outside waiting for me, and they rushed me through. And yeah, we did a lot to keep her. There was a lot, and there was a lot my body had to go through. But I wanted to do that I wanted to be a mum more than anything, because Becky is my greatest gift and achievement in life. So yeah, 28 weeks she came, about 40 hours of labour, but we got through it, and we managed to have her, because I didn't do it on my own. It was a team that brought Becky. I didn't have her, we had her, because without the people in the background, there would be no Becky. So it wasn't me. It was a team effort, for sure. I don't know whether people feel like that when they give birth. I think they feel that they give birth, but I don't feel I did. I feel that the care and the help and the support and the nurturing of Becky inside my womb was what allowed me to be a mum. So, you know, it was a massive deal. She was very ill. She stayed in hospital for a long time, and she weighed 1 pound 9 ounce. So she was so tiny. And yeah, I didn't hold her for a while, but who cares about those things? Like, she was alive, and we just had to keep her alive for as long as we could, until she started to gain the health and the ability to support herself. She was never ventilated, so I was very lucky.
Yeah. So Beth, there's not a lot, I imagine, of support that would have been given to you when you had lost your other babies. Whereas now it's I know a lot of women still feel very alone, and it's still a horrendously traumatic experience for any woman to go through, but there is that support and the ability to talk about it more openly now. How did you cope with all of that back then?
To be honest, I feel like there was nothing. Like you said, now we talk so openly about mental health, menopause, our feelings, the ability to have babies, contraception, IVF, everything. We talk about it. And they're no longer taboo subjects. But 31 years ago, it was a taboo subject to ever feel like, I can remember the consultant. I can remember him as if it was yesterday, and he just tapped me on the leg after it had happened, and after the baby was delivered, and said, "Never mind, you can try again." And I just didn't know what to do. And I also have this really ridiculous politeness to my nature. So if somebody like a consultant who he got me through a long time. I was under consultant care from like the age of 12, but I had a lot of problems. And I had known him a long time, but he was very much the man that everyone looked up to. He was like the god in the gynecological gynae unit, and everybody loved him. And I loved him for how he helped me, but he had no idea how I was feeling. None. And no one offered us support afterwards. There was no counselling. You literally go home from being 24 weeks pregnant and thinking you're going to have a baby, to the next day you try and deliver and you have no baby, and they just put you in a ward with mums who've got babies. And
goodness,
no one thought how that would affect me mentally, not having a baby. So it was a really, really tough time. And I think the things we experience in life and the things we go through, you might not deal with them at that point. You might store them away, and I'm a very good storer. We found out afterwards I have lots of little compartments in my brain, and they have very good locks on them. And so I tend to compartmentalize things and be able to shift them away and pretend they're not there. I think at the time I so wanted to be a mom that I needed to get my body recovered after the trauma in order to try again. So I believe my mind wanted to do that with me and support me. So we just locked away all of the pain and the heartache. You know, I remember being sad, but I remember trying to deal with that sadness as opposed to letting the sadness in and collapsing in a lump on the floor. I never did that. I didn't allow myself to do that because I felt I really could be a mum. I really could have a baby, and I had to believe that in order to go through it again. You know, when you've been through something really tough, it's hard to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and do it again. But I wanted to. So for me, it wasn't, let's just wallow in the grief. I didn't feel that. I felt, okay, let me get healthy. Let me get back on my feet. Let me feel like I am ready to try again. And it was Becky.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't regret not dealing with it at the time. And it came out, trust me, it comes out eventually. You don't keep it away forever.
No. And that's the point, isn't it? Like you think you've dealt, well, I've dealt with that, it's gone, I'm not thinking about it now, but you know, something will trigger that further down the track. And was that the case for you then, that there was a point where all of these emotions and pent up moments of grief came out?
Yeah, they came out. So I gave birth to Becky. Becky came home from hospital after 9 weeks in intensive care. She came home and she only weighed 4 pounds.
Oh, wow.
She slept on a heart monitor for 2 years at home. So we had to resuscitate her. You know, there was times where you will get to her in the night and she was blue. And you've got to deal with all of that. But for me, that was a joy to be her mom and help her through that phase. I didn't look at it as some people would. I looked at it as, aren't I lucky that she's still here with me, you know, through all the highs and lows and ups and downs. Eventually, Becky was just the most perfect child to me, you know, the most amazing baby. And I wrapped her up in cotton wool because she had to be wrapped up in cotton wool. You know, she had pneumonia, she couldn't get infection, all of this. So her and I were in our own little bubble until she started school. And when she started school, that was tough for me to let her go and tough for her. However, then life takes over and other things happen in your life. My mum got sick. And so my mum died in 1999, and she was 66, and from diagnosis to death, we only had a short 6 to 8 week window where we knew what was wrong with her. Before that, we just knew she wasn't well. We didn't know it was anything serious. You know, she would have backache or she would have she just wasn't well, but we didn't know. So I took her and found out what was wrong with her very quickly, and everything escalated. So I feel like I got Becky to the stage where she's at school and starting to thrive, and she was always going to be a little bit behind everyone else because what the trauma her body had gone through and being delivered very early. But then my mind went elsewhere because my mum was ill. So I was kind of juggling quite a lot of things. And my mum died. That was a massive shock for me because we were extremely close, and, you know, they came always to see Becky constantly. We were always in and out of each other's lives and talking like 10 times a day on the phone. So that was a massive loss. But even though that happened and I lost my mum, I didn't have the ability to grieve her because, once again, I've got to be the mum. I've got to look after Becky. I've got to keep her safe. So I locked that away. Well, I thought I had. I tried to lock that away in another one of my compartments. And nearly 2 years later, they all burst open quite unexpectedly. I thought I was fine. I thought I was managing life extremely well and that everyone thought I was amazing coping with all this stuff. But apparently I wasn't. And everyone could see that I wasn't doing it so well. And I ended up having a really serious breakdown and with needing like a lot of intensive treatment to recover. So I spent 2 years, 2 days a week, you know, at a mental hospital. I would go to a mental hospital in the UK. I'm sure they're not labelled the same as they were then now, but that's exactly what I went to all those years ago. And there was a lot of people seriously ill, a lot worse than I, but I needed that help too. And I had the most amazing lady who kind of gave me back my life, I think, who helped me to open all the safes. I'd locked everything away in. She found the codes one by one. And for the first 6 months, I told her nothing. She knew nothing about me for 6 months. I talked about her. I tried everything else. I tried to manage the situation as I've been managing all my life by looking after her and talking about anything else but me. But eventually she broke me down, which is why it took 2 years to do. And yeah, I managed to come out of that feeling like the person I'd lost very early in my 20s because of pain and grief and things that I'd gone through. I almost felt like a little new beginning, if you like. I just walked out and I thought, I'm me again. And I've been able to get through this, but I've gone through so much. Didn't actually acknowledge to myself that I'd gone through that.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to have to go through the 2 years of therapy ever again. But on a positive, which I always like to bring the positive out of it, is the coping mechanisms. Her name was Tracy that looked after me. And Tracy taught me some incredible coping mechanisms. She taught me things in life that are unimportant, that I thought were important. And she tried to put the importance on the things that I would just dismiss.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I'd gone through had kind of distorted my thought process a lot on how life should be as opposed to how my life was because of the things that have happened. So she taught me an awful lot, and they're coping mechanisms that are still used today. And I still suffer with anxiety very badly in certain situations, but I have more control over it now than I ever have, which I'm really pleased about.
And again, that's that talking about it, isn't it? As that it makes it more acceptable, because so many people suffer from anxiety or other forms of mental ill health, that by being open about it, discussing about it, is making it acceptable. And just sharing your story today is going to help other listeners.
Do you know what I always say, Jo? I like to say to people that, my 2 years with Tracy, although hard, and they were extremely hard in parts, I'm not a crier, and eventually I started to cry, and then it's like we couldn't stop the tears. Going through all of that, and how she helped me and how she put things into perspective for me has now allowed me to almost counsel other people and friends around me in situations where they need a little bit of a soft shoulder to lean on or a little bit of advice. If people are asking me things, I kind of go back to her and how she helped me. And I feel like I answer people now in that vein. Especially I've got really one close friend who she was seeing somebody for some help that she needed. And she would go and see this lady and sit down and say, I spoke to Bev and Bev said blah, 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 blah. And the lady would say, I don't think you need to come to me. Can you just ask Bev?
That's gorgeous. Well, truly, our experiences in life are never wasted. They help us to be on the path that we are now. And then, like in your case and in my case, that you can use that to help others.
And I think that's what we should do, because I'm very much a sharer in any part of my life. I try not to say, I can't say that, because if I can't say something that feels uncomfortable to me, maybe just by letting go of that, it will help the person who's in front of me by sharing a snippet of a story or a snippet of, an experience for me. If that can help someone else, I think we should do that. I feel we need to all talk more and be less worried about how people will receive our story.
Yeah. That's right. Because we're always worried about what other people will think. But truly, most people are just worried about themselves.
Do you know, Jo, that was what Tracy taught me. I used to have this real fear, and I had it from a young child. When you run down the road or you're with your friends, I used to have this immense fear of tripping up or falling over or or just someone laughing at me because I'd done something. And I carried that through life. You know, if I ever wobbled on my heels, I would look around and panicked that, you know, everyone was looking at me. And Tracy said to me, she said, "What makes you think you're that important?" And I said, "Oh, I'm not important. I'm not important. I never see myself as important." She said, "What you do, because you're thinking that you wobbling on your heels or you're tripping or anything is going to go into that person's life, their day, their memory, and they are going to think about you." And I said, no, I don't feel like that. As soon as she said it to me, I thought, I'm never going to think that again.
Yeah,
because I don't think I'm important.
That's the reality check. That's the mirror, isn't it? That you really
Yeah.
need to be looking at, the mirror of what that thought really represents.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, no, I would hate people to think of me like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, that's basically the flip side of you really wasting all this time and energy thinking people are still thinking about you after you wobbled on your heel 20 minutes ago.
Yes.
You know, they're not thinking about you.
It's that waste of energy and time. You go, oh my God. And I think that's probably one of the things, to be honest, it's still in the back of my mind at certain times of what people might think and the judginess that will happen.
Yeah.
You spend so much time when you're younger worrying about that, whereas it's not nowhere near to that degree now. Nowhere.
You know, I think as well, when we get older, we have so much life experience. Maybe we don't always tap into that for various reasons. Some people don't have that ability to do that. But I feel for us, if we can now look at ourselves and say, you know, I'm proud of who I am today. I'm proud of the experiences I've been through, even though some of them were bloody tough. I'm still proud that I came out the other side of them. And things now, when they come into your life, you're able to deal with them slightly differently with kind of less care what other people think. Yeah. And like you, I still worry what people think of me. Of course, we all do. You know, when I'm dancing around in front of the camera, some days I'll literally walk away and think, I can't believe I just did that. And then other days I'm fully there and not caring, you know, so we do care. And people are judgy, as we said earlier, whether they like to admit it or not. We all have that little bit of judgment in us, some more than others. And we have to let that go because we have one life and it's ours.
That's it.
And we're in our journey ourselves.
Yeah.
Our experiences are just with our loved ones, because for me, that's all that matters in life. Nothing matters besides, for me, nothing matters in my life besides me, Johnny, Becky, and Becky's husband, Lockie. They're our immediate kind of, this is it. And then our family that's around that. Everything else really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know,
that's so true.
That's why we do it.
Yeah. And
isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. It's taking that big view that we sometimes have and just narrow down on really what is your why, what is the important things that are in your life. You can get rid of a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I often say to people, you know, Becky for me is my thought. Every time I think to myself, I can't cope with this, or, you know, this is a struggle, I just immediately go back to having Becky and thinking all I ever wanted was Becky. I wanted to be a mum, and I wanted to be the best mum I could ever be. Yeah. And it's kind of my life's job. Like, we are so close, and no matter what they need or ask, we drop everything and we go. And that doesn't suit other people's lives. Some people don't agree with that amount of commitment. But for me, it was a commitment I made to Becky when I wanted her so desperately, that I would always be her mum. Yes. Not just when she was little. I would always be her mum. And no matter what she needs in life, Johnny and I stop what we're doing and we go and do it. That isn't because she's demanding that. That's because we want to do it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And that's all I can ever kind of put down to. No matter what else I do, I'm a mum first.
Oh, that's lovely, Bev. Now you mentioned that Johnny and Paul is Becky's biological dad. Yeah. So when did you meet Johnny, and how did Johnny come to play a big role in your life, or your life?
When I was talking about my relationship with Tracy, my therapist, and my 2 years of recovering, Johnny was on the new side of that. So I came out of this, and my relationship with Becky's dad, who is an amazing father, amazing man, and I don't have anything negative to say about the guy. It's just amazing. But when I came out the other side of it, Paul and I were together from those beginning days where I found out I had cervical cancer, through all of our problems of trying to have Becky and all of the pain that comes with that, which we realised I didn't deal with for so much longer. Mm-hmm. I realised through that time and heartache that I'd actually changed and moulded into someone that didn't sit as comfortably with me as the teenager before that, the free teenager. And Paul will say to this day that it was Tracy that kind of came between us. But I feel like Tracy kind of just allowed me to put my life into some kind of perspective. I actually love Paul so much. He's a great man. But I knew that we weren't meant to be destined to be together. I knew there had to be some change for me. And, we'd gone through a lot of changes in a very small time, and we had a very successful business and growth and more and more and more. But because I went back to finding the real me with Tracy, I realised I didn't need all of this material thing and life that we had, which is a great life. And most people have never understood me for sharing these words, but it didn't necessarily suit me to have all of the things, I could easily have given up some of those things that we had. And I think just seeing Tracy and talking with her, I realised that I probably didn't need so much around me anymore to feel happy. I feel I just needed simple things and to be Becky's mum. So there became an imbalance in our relationship. And I guess it did come from me being in therapy and just truly finding out who I was without all of the rubbish on top of it. And the life I felt I wanted was very simple and not really the growth more. I probably didn't need that anymore. So that was the breakup of our marriage, which was really, really sad. Becky was around the 10 age mark. So really tough age for her. She loved us both dearly. When I met Johnny, I think the first things I said to Johnny was, I come as a package. I have Becky, and Becky's my everything, and she will always be my everything. And if you can't handle that, I'm good with it. I'm fully okay with it because there's no compromise for me. I'll be the parent that parents her. I don't ever need you to step in and try and be anything other than you, who you are. But if that doesn't feel comfortable, then we can't, it's not going to work, and let's not put her through that. But Johnny is the most amazing man and didn't have any children and took a really quiet backseat with Becky and let their relationship build very, very slowly until Becky came to him more naturally. I really admire him, how he dealt with it. He definitely didn't come into the relationship with a 10-year-old trying to parent her at all. And he probably doesn't even do that now. And she absolutely adores him, and their relationship is truly, truly amazing. The four of us are so close, and she adores everything about him. But Johnny is a quiet man. So he wasn't that gung-ho, I'm going to, try and replace your dad. No replacing Becky's dad at all. And he didn't want Becky to feel that. So we just decided, I think, all the changes, then our friends emigrated to Australia, and I think we decided that, do you know what? That might be fun, going back to 8-year-old me who sat on the top of her slide and said, I would like to live in Australia. And so they said, why don't you apply for your permanent residence visa? And we're like, we couldn't do it. I had a successful business in the UK. I had a bridal boutique. Johnny had a great job. Becky was happy at school. Everything was telling us no. So we just went through the paperwork, paid an agent to do it for us. It was the nightmarish application, so difficult. And then we got the visa, we got it. And we're like, what do we do with it now? Do we go? Do we stay? What do we do? And we went like this. We'll go. No, we're not going. Becky didn't want to go. Becky definitely didn't want to go to start with. Becky would be leaving her dad. You know, all of the problems that getting a visa to move to the other side of the world would raise in a family. And then eventually we came and visited Australia 4 times, 4 very expensive times, as you know from your trip to Europe. It's not cheap to keep going and doing these things. But we thought, if you're going to move your life, you've got to be sure you're doing the right thing. And then one day Becky said, what about if I went to Australia with a friend as opposed to going with us, and stay with these friends of ours that are family, Andrea and Mike, and we stay with them, and then I see if I like it. And I said, okay, let's do that. So Becky came with her friend Rachel and had a ball, had the time of her life. And while she was here, went to UQ in Brisbane, visited Women's College, had an interview, got in, and filled out her application for uni.
Wow.
All the time while she was here. So she really wanted to give it a try. So she had a great place in, she had a place in Exeter to start university in the UK. So we deferred that for 1 year to give her the opportunity to try. Bought her out in 2011 at the time of the floods, and I wondered what the hell I was doing leaving her here, because Brisbane was almost still underwater. We didn't know whether we didn't know whether the plane could land when we got in, because it was still so bad. And got to UQ, and a lot of the dormitories where they lived had been underwater, and I'm like, I can't do this. What am I even thinking? Anyway, I got over it, and she moved in to Women's College, not knowing one person, no one at all. And the rest is history, because she loved it 6 weeks later, we FaceTimed every day. And she said to me, guess what? I said, what? She said, do you want to sell the house and move? I think I'll stay.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, you can do it now. So we literally put the house on the market, sold it within a week, and I started to wind down my bridal business. And that was, so she started UQ in February. This was probably April, end of April, when she said she'd stay. And we got here in October.
Brilliant. And you settled on the Sunshine Coast?
Yeah, so we'd visited the Sunshine Coast a few times on those trips back and forth, and always loved the sunny coast. And it always felt quite, this is right. We've been to Perth, we've been to lots of places on these trips, but Queensland felt right, and the Sunshine Coast felt right. And Becky wanted her own independence in Brisbane. She didn't want us to live too close to her. And I really, really, looking back, as an 18-year-old, I really admire her for making that decision, because she said, I can come home to the coast. It's not far, but you're far enough away that she felt independent of us. And so that was a great move. And at the time, I thought it was ridiculous. I think we needed to live in Women's with her. Yeah. But she didn't agree, of course. Not that they would have had us in there.
Yeah.
And kind of we settled, and she did law, and she's now a lawyer in the city. And yeah.
Brilliant.
It all worked out. It really worked out. But it was humongous. We were 48 when we moved. How ridiculous.
But how exciting as well. Like I'm finding this stage now, it's ripe for new adventures.
Yeah,
and to try new things. That's what I'm absolutely loving about it. And it can be daunting, and you don't know what the end result is going to be, but I don't want to have a go, red hot crack at anything.
I agree, Jo. I think, why can't we? Like, a lot of our friends said, are you really going to literally crash this amazing life that you have here, and you're going to put it to the ground? You're going to get on a flight, your belongings are in a container on a boat, they're not going to get to you for quite a while. Are you sure this is the right thing to do? And we never looked back.
Yeah.
I don't believe in walking backwards in life. I think if you make a decision, then just keep going that direction. Don't look over your shoulder all the time and say, what if we went back now? Or should we go back? And I know there are a lot of people that make that decision. I'm not saying that's wrong, but for us it was. We had ummed and ahed enough before we got here. So the minute we got here, we just need to go for it. We're here now. Let's settle. Let's have the best time. And let's start a new chapter in our lives, which we did. And Becky calls Australia home and would never consider living back in the UK. So that's probably quite a big thing for me as a mum, that she feels like that.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's huge. That really is
huge.
And you know that those decisions that you made were the right ones.
Yeah, I think you put a lot of thought into them as well. I feel like even getting the visa, the bloody visa process was huge. So I think if you can get through that and you can keep going through it, that's actually quite a big kind of turning point, because you think, we've gone through this, we're not going to do all this for nothing, you know. So we just had, you know, we had 5 years to get here from when you get the visa, and I think we got here, we emigrated like 4 years and something. So we were right on the cusp.
Okay, you were right to the very edge. Love it.
It took us a long time to make the decision, but it was definitely, the timing was right. Becky had finished school. She'd done extremely well. She was ready to start uni.
Yeah.
Everything was right for her at that point.
Now, Bev, we haven't even touched on your career in the world of fashion. We have gone down
such a rabbit hole.
I love it because I had all my list of questions on things to ask with that. But given the time that we've got now, I would love to have you back on to talk part 2 of Bev. Would you be open to that?
I would love to, Jo. Love to. I'd love
because
to.
There's so much more to talk about, and so many other areas in life and in women's, I suppose, and women's thoughts, women's viewing of themselves that we can discuss. And we haven't touched about, your journey that you had to go through then of full hysterectomy and on hormone replacement from the age of 40 and what that meant for you. So I would love to be able to reschedule a part 2.
I'd love to come back because, as I said to you in the beginning with our little natter, anything that I can share that can help even one person puts a big smile on my face, because I think we need that support at this age. So I'm more than happy to do that.
Brilliant. Well, in the meantime, you can find Bev on Instagram. So Bev, do you want to give your Instagram handle for everybody?
Yes. So I am at the Iris May Style on Instagram.
Beautiful. And that will also be in the show notes for you. So you've got that direct link there to be able to click on. And you can see all the amazing things that Bev does on her Instagram as well while you're waiting for part 2 when we talk about her incredible fashion was. Well, I have absolutely loved. I felt like I was sitting down with a very familiar old friend, just talking about some big things in life. So thank you for your honesty, for your transparency, and being so vulnerable with the things that you went through, because talking about these matters, no matter what age, they do show. And there's all those little memories in there that we've all experienced at some point that I think as women, we've touched on a lot of them today.
Yeah, and I think, we've said this so many times that women just need each other. Yeah. They need to know they're not alone. And some of the topics I brought up, I'm sure other people have been through them, but kept to themselves. So, hopefully they'll feel like I've gone through some things that they can identify with.
Yes. Thank you, Bev. And
my pleasure.
If people do need that extra support, then thankfully now we've got lots of options for women to be able to get some extra support in those areas. So make sure.
And it's no longer taboo to ask for help or have the courage to ask for help. Sometimes it's the courage to ask that holds people back rather than the asking.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Bev. And I know that people are going to be loving this conversation. So I appreciate the time that you've taken today. And I look forward to part 2 of the Bev story as well.
My pleasure, Jo. My absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. To keep spreading these empowering messages, please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.